patrons, and welcome to part 3 of the Kingdom Death Warrior of the Sun paint-along. In today's video, we'll be covering the hair. The colors we'll be using in the video are Nightshade Purple, Dragon Red, Volcanic Orange, and Bright Skin Highlight. I know these are a little bit of crazy colors, but I wanted to do something that had more of a fantasy feel to it, not necessarily a realistic feel, since she is set in a fantasy world. I also want to point out that I'm using some of the new Reaper Master Series paints, the black tops with their high density pigment. The thing I've noticed with these, I really like them. They have some really neat colors associated with this line. The pigment is, obviously there's more pigment to the paint, so it's a little thicker. I have to thin it down a little bit more with water, but other than that, it's just as good as any other Reaper paint, so I like to use them interchangeably with the rest of my paint line. So I'm going to start off with my Nightshade Purple. That's going to be my shadow color, and I'm going to mix it with just a little bit of my Dragon Red to get my base tone. And as we've done in the previous videos, if this paint bottle will work, as we've done in the previous videos, I'm going to mix some colors together to show you kind of where I'm going with these. It's a great orange. So I'm putting the colors down in the order that I would paint them in. So I'll be using this as my shadow color, this nice dark Nightshade Purple. What I want to do is, the reason I chose the purple along with the reds is because she is a pinup warrior of the sun, so I thought it was fitting she'd have some pretty orangish red hair. As well as using this darker color, this cooler color in my shadows to accentuate and tie in the colors I want to use on her outfit. I'd like to use some blues or some purples. I haven't really decided yet, but when I get to that, it'll tie in with the cooler colors, and it will be just a nice tie-in. So I'm going to mix some of that in there to get my base tone. Gonna make it a little bit more purple, and I'll put some more red out, but I think I want just about there, and then I'll put some more red on the palette. So I'll take that, we'll work up to that red when we're painting, and then I'll take some of the orange, and again mix the orange between the orange and those two, and then I'll go up to that orange, and from there I'll take the orange, and with my highlights I'll use more of this brighter color as my highlights. And you can see it's actually a really nice color and works really well. Just make a nice lighter orange to that. Alright, start off with the base coat like we did with the skin, and it's just as simple as painting all of the hair the same color, and we're gonna do a couple coats of this. Let each one dry. I might have to mix up a little bit more paint, but just paint all over the hair. Careful not to paint the face. And if you do happen to paint outside of the lines and maybe get some paint where you don't mean to, you can go through and you can line. And I'm gonna line too. I'm gonna go in and do some lining. Probably with the purple on my smaller brush. And I'll tilt her so you can see the back of her head. There you go. See, I'm just trying to get everything covered. Oops. And if you mess up, like I just did, just take your brush and wash it off really quick. Just pull that wet paint away. And it should come right off. Alright, I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to put down another base coat. And then I'll come back around and I'll show you guys some lining with my darker purple just to clean up where the hair meets the face. So now that we've got the second base coat on, I want to show you guys some lining, which is what I do to kind of clean up where the hair would meet the skin. And I also do this, I think we did this in the previous video with the skin tones, where you kind of clean up where, the cloth meets the skin as well. So this just works really well, especially in such a small 28 millimeter. It really just helps clean things up. So I'm going to hit the side of her hair. Just kind of clean it up. And I'll go back in and I'm just kind of making this nice outline, this nice edge. Just so everything looks clean with that darker color. I'm just using the Nightshade Purple for this. You can use the black and brown as well. Just has to be a darker color. I'm gonna try to get under here, under her hair, right there. So just in those areas, just to kind of give some definition. And then I'll just try not to paint that line. Oh, yes, I also want to paint on her little eyebrow. So I'll grab that with a little, make sure I have a good point on my brush. And again, I'll use the Nightshade. There we go. Just kind of right in between there where the brow. It's not too hard to paint on that eyebrow. Sometimes they're a little trickier. All right, let's move on. I'm gonna change back to my 3-0 brush. I was using my really tiny brush for that. Now I'm gonna change back and work my way up to my highlights. The thing to remember when you're painting hair and putting on your highlights is hair is more reflective than skin tones, and a lot of times how you're gonna paint the highlight on is based on your light source. So if my light source is kind of from behind, it's almost like a halo shape. So we're gonna work our way up from not so much detail to detail. This model is nice. It's got these little patches of hair sculpted into the sculpt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by kind of accentuating these, and then as I get a little further along, I'm going to start putting in just a couple individual strands here and there as I work up to my higher highlights, and putting in more details as we go. So working from general to specific. I'll put in a little bit of my purple shadows here. Don't forget that. And kind of do that wash where I just use a little water, make it a little bit more runny there, and throw some shadows in. I'll paint back over this too, but just to give the hair a little depth in places. Probably underneath here. Maybe on the bottoms here, just to give it a little bit more depth. And it's going to dry lighter than what I put it down as. Alright, now I'm going to start working up to that dragon red. Alright, now as I said before, I'm going to kind of start general to specific and start kind of highlighting these sections of hair that are sculpted on and leaving my base tone in the cracks. It's such a small area, it doesn't take very long before you work up the highlight. You can go along with grab this hair with these edge of my brush. Same with here. If you want to cheat a little bit, you can kind of use the edge of your brush there on this first layer of red, kind of pick up those colors and those details. And again, it's such small spaces that you work up to that red really quick. Also, the great thing about hair that I like is that you don't have to be as smooth with it, since you kind of want to get across that it has individual strands. I paint in the direction the hair is going. It doesn't have to be as smooth. Kind of grab down here a little bit, bring that back up. Alright, now I'm going to work up to that color in between the orange and the red. I'm going to switch to my fine brush. It just makes it that much easier. And again, move colors pretty quickly. Concentrating in a smaller and smaller area. Kind of start laying in some details with the side of my brush. It's the easiest way to do it. And I'm going to start wanting to, some of my highlights are going to be along here, and kind of where anything curves, shove highlights along this edge, along her bangs, on her little kind of hairdo, her buns here, and then where the hair kind of flips. You want to put some highlights there too, and on the very tips of the hair. For this kind of stuff, I think that looking at the style of the Japanese cartoons, the Japanese animation, and how they highlight their hair is a great reference, because you can kind of see all those crazy highlights. And that's kind of the example, especially when I'm working with these crazy colors like this. You can see how within this section I'm kind of starting to pick out individual strands. Well, as close as you can get since it's such a small scale. I use the side of my brush quite often with this. It's just easier on the raised edges to kind of pull some of that color in. Just throwing in some more layers here. Kind of bringing this orange highlight up here. Sorry. So the other thing you want to keep in mind when you're painting hair and you're working up towards that highlight is where your highlight's going to be, the shadows in the hair are actually going to disappear more. So that's why I'm actually making it so it appears brighter up here. I'm applying more paint up here and kind of working my way up to my highlight, and it's stronger like here on her, on the hair here, and then up where my highlight is going to be. This helps you achieve more of a uniform highlight on hair. And when you look at reference pictures, you'll see that a lot of times you can't make out any detail where the brightest part of the highlight is. So the shadows kind of recede where that light is hitting it. And I'm just finishing up the orange here, putting down a little bit more orange, making that orange a little bit more vibrant. And then I'll start working my way to that bright skin highlight, that yellow, for my highlight here. Here, I'll get closer. Good. All right, now I'm going to move up to that, the orange mixed with a little bit of the yellow. And if it's too bright, I'll go back in and I'll put down some orange over it, kind of glazing and trying not to paint anywhere else. So I'm going to go back in with some orange and go over what I've painted, kind of to just bring up that orange, because I feel like it's too stark of a contrast between the bottom there and this, and I'll just repaint it. And I didn't feel like I brought my orange up enough, so I'm going back in and adding a little bit more orange just to make that a brighter color. And then I'll come back in with my mix of my orange and my yellow. So fine with the detail. Again, I'm using the side of my brush. Sorry. Oh. Okay, now I'm moving up to that bright yellow, and then we'll move on to just the bright white highlight. I'm not talking much because it actually takes a lot of concentration to steady my hand, especially painting at this angle for the camera. All right. Now that I've got in those bright yellow highlights, I'm going to go in and put down some of my Liquitex Heavy Body Titanium White just to finish off that highlight. Got it? So you can see where I'm kind of blending some of these white highlights together, like here, but leaving them here because they're bigger sections of hair. And that's what I meant from general to specific. Kind of blending them across the sections so they look uniform. And I will call that done for the hair. That wraps up part 3, painting hair on the Kingdom Death, Warrior of the Sun. Thanks so much for joining us and for being a patron. Spread the word and join us on Discord. Bye.